On April 13th, 2013, police executed a search of this unit, and to say they hit the jackpot would be an understatement. Not only did they find the white Crown Victoria, but they also unveiled police uniforms and badges, bulletproof vests, and an arsenal of weaponry, including knives, a crossbow, multiple guns, and ammunition that could have killed both Mark Hasse and the McClellans. And of course, pickle jars filled with homemade napalm. Several firearms were sent in for forensic testing, along with a stray bullet which was found in a random bag away from all of the other ammunition. The chase reaches speeds of over 100 miles per hour, and more shots are fired at law enforcement, all while weaving in and out of traffic. At one point, Evan blows a tire and smoke billows out from his vehicle, hindering the police cruiser's field of view. But the officer remains calm and stays right on Evan's tail. Eventually, Evan exits the highway, and the chase continues through the streets of Wise County. Then, out of nowhere, an 18-wheeler slams into Evan. His car is totaled, but the action isn't over yet. Evan immediately exits the vehicle and fires a barrage of bullets at the officers. The officers fire back, hitting Evan multiple times. Evan Ebel was killed instantly. Several significant pieces of evidence were found in Evan's Cadillac, including Nathan's Domino's uniform, directions to Tom Clement's house, a manifesto outlining his grievances with the prison system, and a hit list of other prison offenders. The next day, on April 12, 2013, the search is in full swing, with Kaufman County investigators and the FBI working together. During this search, they find even more than they were hoping for. In a filing cabinet in the garage, they found the vehicle registration for a white Ford Crown Victoria. They also found a scrap piece of paper. Written on it was an anonymous tip website and a password. When the police gained access to this account, they confirmed that Eric was the one taunting and extorting law enforcement.
We are not unreasonable, but we will not be stopped.
Authorities have arrested 46-year-old Eric Williams. He's charged with making a terroristic threat after searching his home.
2 months later, when Evan Ebel's murder spree ended with his death, Mike and Kaufman authorities wondered if they could link Evan's 211 crew affiliation and hit list to Mark's murder as well. Unfortunately, Mike wouldn't live long enough to find out, as he became the next victim.
District Attorney Mike McClellan and his wife Cynthia have been found shot to death.
It is the second shooting of a prosecutor in the small Texas town this year, coming just 2 months after Assistant District Attorney Mark Hasse was shot dead outside the local courthouse on his way to work.
But one of these tips was much different than the others. It came in on the night of Easter Sunday, and it simply read,
Do we have your full attention now? Only a response from Judge Bruce Woods will be answered. You have 48 hours.
Law enforcement decided to respond.
You have our attention. How can the county judge contact you?
Since the Crime Stoppers program protects the anonymity of those sending tips, law enforcement had no choice but to await a response from this mysterious tipster. Perhaps the most compelling moment of the trial is what happened next. This is Kim Williams, Eric's wife and alleged getaway driver. Back in 2013, Kim was arrested at the same time as Eric, and detectives spoke with her for hours in the interrogation room. Although she was first defensive about her husband, she slowly let her guard down and eventually told the detectives what really happened. They convinced her to take a plea deal. Since she was protected by spousal immunity, she was not forced to testify against Eric. However, as part of her deal, they asked that she provide testimony during the penalty phase of the trial. She agreed.
It was a cold day, and
There was excitement in the air.
Killed both Mark Hasse and the McClellans. And of course, pickle jars filled with homemade napalm. Several firearms were sent in for forensic testing, along with a stray bullet which was found in a random bag away from all of the other ammunition. Meanwhile, another team of investigators were taking a look through the past cases involving both Mike McClelland and Mark Hasse. From these case files, a new suspect emerged, former Justice of the Peace and Mensa member, Eric Williams. In 2011, Eric was arrested and charged with felony theft. This Mensa-certified genius seemed to have forgotten that there were cameras in the courthouse when he stole 3 computers. Following his arrest, he was brought to the interrogation room for questioning.
Okay, before we get started, I'm ready to Miranda. You're an attorney, you're a judge, so you know this. What does that do?
I know you gotta read.
Okay.
It's been an ongoing kind of thing where I tell the IT people, look, that I need to keep improving things.
I understand, but you hadn't put any kind of written request, nothing like that's been documented, dog.
No, nothing like that.
I don't think that you actually believe, I mean, you're an educated person, I see your class ring on your finger, that you can just walk into the ID department and say, I need a monitor, I'm taking that one. I mean,
There's places that do that.
places being here in Coleman County or?
Well, I mean, there's businesses that, yeah.
Eric was offered a plea deal, which would reduce the charges from a felony to a misdemeanor. She agreed.
It was a cold day, and there was excitement in the air. He came up with a plan to dress like law enforcement. He was modeling it for me.
Describe to the members of the jury what he was modeling for you the night before.
I want to say he looked like he was in the Army or SWAT. He had a bulletproof vest that had sheriff on the front. That more than likely Mrs. McClellan was going to answer the door and he was going to introduce himself as a policeman.
You may be wondering why Cynthia had to die if Mike was the target. Kim explained Eric's simple reasoning to the court.
She would be there as a witness, and he described it as collateral damage.
What did he tell you about how Cynthia McClellan died?
He told me that he had to shoot her an extra time because she was still moaning.
That night, Kim and Eric celebrated the double murder by having a feast.
We had steaks on the grill, and Eric
At your parents' house?
at my parents' house.
Were you all celebrating with steaks?
That's correct.
During the guilt phase of the trial, the prosecution team was not allowed to bring up the details of the Mark Hasse case, so they used this opportunity to bring the jury up to speed.
Did you agree to drive?
Yes, I did.
You knew what was going to happen.
Yes, I did.
Why did you agree to drive to the murder of Mark Hasse?
I was so drugged up, and I so believed in Eric and everything that he told me. His anger was my anger.
Kim went on to recount the moments following Mark's shooting.
As you're driving away from the scene of the Hasse murder, what is his mood like?
Happy.
What is your mood like?
Happy.
She also recalled driving to a bridge one night with Eric, where he threw a bag into the lake below.
Do you know what was in the bag?
I knew that it was guns.
After 7 months of searching, the bag was found at the bottom of the lake. It turns out that it wasn't a bag at all, but rather a Halloween mask that Eric wore during Mark's shooting in order to conceal. That brings us to the main subject of our video. The story begins in Seattle, Washington, on the evening of August 31st, 2012. Kevin Watts and his friend Angelo Rama were driving around a quiet suburban neighborhood when they heard 5 pops behind them. The next thing they saw was a BMW speeding past them into oncoming traffic through a red light. When they saw this, they decided to take justice into their own hands, and a brief car chase ensued. But they couldn't manage to catch up. They turned around to investigate where they heard the pops come from. Their intuition was correct. A shooting had taken place. A red Subaru Forester still sat before the intersection with its motor running. Glass from a car window was shattered all over the ground. 911 was called, and when detectives arrived on the scene, they confirmed that the victim was Yancey Knoll. Yancey was an avid outdoorsman who volunteered for Habitat for Humanity. He taught kids how to rock climb, and was a course marshal during the Seattle Marathon. He was described as the glue that held together a large group of friends and neighbors. Yancey had just left the QFC store on Capitol Hill where he worked as a wine steward. He was idling behind a bus, waiting for a red light to change at 15th Avenue Northeast and Northeast 75th Street, when someone pulled alongside him and opened fire. One of the shots fired had actually missed, and 92-year-old Mrs. Schulmeister nearly tripped on a bullet in what is perhaps even more twisted are the hundreds of recorded phone calls while he was in jail. He and Jennifer used pet names Bunny and Snuggles and spoke to each other in baby talk.
Bunny, Bunny, how are you? I'm doing good. How's my little snuggle cake? I just wrote you an email. Yay. I miss so many things right now.
The problem with David's overly confident attitude is that he seems to have gone into this with no foresight or strategy. He constantly realizes that what he is saying could come back later to bite him. He changes his story in the moment and then tries to play it off cool. But these story changes add up, and it only makes it more clear that David has no solid alibi.
You know that we have all your co-suspects under arrest. All I want from you is a reason. I understand what.
At age 13, Din was featured in a 1996 Seattle Times story when he was nationally ranked in fencing and already taking computer science courses at the Seattle Pacific University. By age 17, he had started his own successful robotics company, Vague Industries. He has been described by his peers as a brilliant engineer and has the certified IQ of a genius. Police set up a stakeout surrounding the Bowman residence, which was merely 10 blocks away from where Yancey Knoll was gunned down. They monitored him for a week before catching one fateful glimpse into his garage.
You're not free to leave. You can't leave.
Okay.
Charges are being figured out right now.
All right. In that case,
there's going to be charges. So
okay. Then in that case, I have nothing else to say, and let me know when I need a lawyer. No problem. Thank you for making me realize that. In that case, I have absolutely nothing to say, and let me know when I need a lawyer.
Okay.
All right.
It's technical misunderstandings like this that will exemplify why a lawyer is crucial. Boundaries during an interrogation are fortified by legal literacy, so having a lawyer ASAP is the safest option. Mark eventually went to trial and was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison. That brings us to the main subject of our video. The story begins in Seattle, Washington on the evening of August 31st, 2012. Kevin Watts and his friend Angelo Rama were driving around a quiet suburban neighborhood when they heard 5 pops behind them. They searched his computer and discovered an absurd amount of documents collected over the years, all surrounding the topic of death and murder. They also found that he was obsessed with 007 and based much of his life around that.
Bond. James Bond.
There were videos showcasing his stunt driving skills and footage of his marksman-level accuracy in a shooting competition. This is David Wright, the first type of genius, the know-it-all. At 3:40 a.m. on February 17th, 2019, David Wright and his friend Chris Phelps headed on their way to a Jack in the Box parking lot to sell drugs. Both parties involved in this drug deal secretly planned to rob each other. When the two parties met, David took the offensive and pushed for the other group to hand over their belongings. This did not go as David planned, and the other party pepper-sprayed Chris and then took off running. David acted quickly, and he immediately fired a gunshot at Raul Quadro. Raul was hit directly in the chest, and he passed away while lying on the pavement in the parking lot. David and Chris then hopped into a vehicle driven by their getaway drivers, Cody Anderson and Raymond Tanhill. They were then taken to a nearby farmhouse where they disposed of the weapon and changed their clothes. All of the parties were quickly identified due to multiple cameras surrounding the scene of the crime, and 2 days later, David was brought in for questioning. He was idling behind a bus, waiting for a red light to change at 15th Avenue Northeast and Northeast 75th Street, when someone pulled alongside him and opened fire. One of the shots fired had actually missed, and 92-year-old Mrs. Schulmeister nearly tripped on a bullet in her house. It was from a 9mm pistol. The bullet went out through the passenger side window of Yancey's car, through a fence, through a window, through a lampshade, into a hallway, and directly impacted a picture of Mrs. Schulmeister's precious kitty cat, Miss BP, before falling to the floor. The other 4 bullets had connected with Yancey, who had 4 gunshot wounds to his face and head. What made this crime scene peculiar was the shattered glass on Yancey's driver's side.
A jury has found Din Bowman guilty of murdering Yancey Knoll. Prosecutors said he killed Knoll for the thrill of it.
Yes, Michelle. Now, this jury had just over a day to deliberate. They deliberated all day yesterday and a couple hours this morning. Then they gathered in the courtroom, and the judge read the verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Thomas Bin Bowman, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree as charged.
Yancey Knoll was driving home from work back in August of 2012 when prosecutors say he was shot by someone for the thrill of it. Din Bowman, 32 years old, pleaded.
I'm not talking to you like a child. How did I talk to you like a child? Tell me when.
I think you have to explain a word that you're using to me.
Most people don't know what that word means. I apologize.
Most people are fucking idiots.
Okay, you can pretend you're getting upset about it, but you're really not.
No, what I'm getting upset about is you call me a liar.
Because you lied. You lied. And I don't actually think I called you a liar. I did say you lied, but I don't think I actually called you a liar. So I'll call it to you now so we can just move past it. You are a liar. You have lied.
With this statement, David must have realized that he had talked far too much and said nothing for the rest of his time in custody. He was later taken to court and pled not guilty, which only resulted in David receiving the maximum sentence, 40 years without the possibility of parole. The obvious takeaway from this example is that a genius would not speak to the authorities without an attorney present. The second type of so-called genius is a little bit different. His name is Mark Denklo. He also agreed to answer questions, but seems to have a bit more experience in dealing with the authorities. Unlike David, Mark has a plan going into this to set strong boundaries.
Mark? Yep. My name's Scott Curtis with the Clark County Sheriff's Office.
All right. What's your name?
Kevin.
Kevin?
Also with Clark County. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read them to you.
All right.
All right? Before you are asked any questions, you must understand your rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to talk to a lawyer before we ask you any questions.
But the people that he is close to. He informed David that if he doesn't cooperate truthfully, those who are loyal to him will suffer the consequences. He even extended an olive branch to David, providing him with a valid excuse for the shooting, practically advising him to say that it was an accident. David has two options. Take the detective's advice and say that it was an accident, or double down. What choice do you think David made?
How the f*** would somebody accidentally shoot somebody?
David is clearly driven by one thing, his ego. He would rather dig himself a deeper hole than admit that somebody else is smarter than him. For the rest of this interrogation, he does just that.
Just because I met up with somebody doesn't mean that I went with them to go do something. People buy guns for all sorts of reasons, man.
Yeah, but in this instance, there was a murder.
So you clearly have a genuine distrust of the police.
Din's smug look was swept away after the judge read the verdict, and his anguish only grew as his parents begged the judge for mercy. Din Bowman was sentenced to 29 years in prison, and just hours later, Bowman attempted to shorten his sentence, and officers found a sharp object in his cell. This attempt was unsuccessful, and he is currently serving out his sentence at the Clallam Bay Correction Center in Clallam County.
Couple weeks.
And for you to say you don't know, it defies any kind of logic I can ever think of. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm tired of you sitting there playing dumb. You're a smart woman trying to be the good wife and protecting this guy, okay? When he's out friggin' murdering people, okay? This guy died, okay? He bled all over the frickin' streets of Seattle, okay? He's dead. He's got women, he's got a girlfriend, he's got family, and they all frickin' cry every day. We've had them in this very same room. This very same room. You're gonna sit in here and protect him? That is sick. That is sick. That is disgusting. And I'm disgusted by it. You need to grow up, lady. You need to grow up. Take a stand.
Cry. I feel like I'm about to. But
Well, then cry and tell us the truth.
I cry easily.
Tell us the truth. Tell me the truth right now.
I have told you the truth.
We proved you wrong already. We're going to prove you wrong more.
Following these interrogations, Din was to be held in custody until his final trial began. In the meantime, the investigation continued. They searched his computer and discovered an absurd amount of documents collected over the years, all surrounding the topic of death and murder. They also found that he was obsessed with 007.
At the hospital.
Well, if you don't know about it, then that's not what you're talking to me about. You'd already, do you know what I'm talking about? Is that what this is about?
No.
Is it about the other night?
It does involve Nicole. So
Okay.
I don't know what the hospital thing is, so if that's not part of Nicole's issues, then...
Okay.
So... Nicole had a...
I'm not going to answer any more questions about Nicole.
Okay.
I don't have any more answers for you until I find out what you're talking about. If you don't want to tell me what the heck I'm doing here, say so. Because I'm not going to sit here and give you a bunch of my background so you can play whatever kind of game you're playing.
To answer Mark's question, he was brought in due to the kidnapping, torture, and murder of a former member of his club, the Gypsy Jokers. Robert Huggins, or Bagger Bob, as Mark calls him, was allegedly kicked out of the gang for stealing from the club and blaming it on heroin. As payback for being kicked out of the gang, Robert allegedly broke into Mark's home. He assaulted and tied up Mark's partner Nicole and proceeded to steal many of the firearms that example. is that a genius would not speak to the authorities without an attorney present. The second type of so-called genius is a little bit different. His name is Mark Denklo. He also agreed to answer questions, but seems to have a bit more experience in dealing with the authorities. Unlike David, Mark has a plan going into this to set strong boundaries.
Mark? Yep. My name's Scott Curtis with the Clark County Sheriff's Office.
All right. What's your name?
Kevin Harper.
Kevin?
Also with Clark County. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read them to you.
All
right? Before you are asked any questions, you must understand your rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to talk to a lawyer before we ask you any questions and have him present with you while you're being questioned. If you cannot afford a lawyer, the court will appoint one before any questioning. Okay? I have read each of the above rights and understand them. Is that correct, sir?
Yep.
All right. If I can have you sign right there, please.